Chapter 3. Critical Reading of Multimodal Arguments. Of course, not all arguments are written. In addition to the critical reading skills discussed in Chapter 2, special scrutiny is needed when listening to and viewing arguments in other media. We use the term multimodal in the title of this chapter because now we turn to arguments that use words in combination with other medium or that use a mode other than printed word to get the message across: visual, audiovisual, and digital media. In reading written text, we used 3 steps to help uncover the essential elements of argument: pre-reading, reading for content and structure, and evaluation. The same general principles apply to looking at multimodal arguments, but we will change them a bit depending on the types of arguments we consider in this chapter: visual, audiovisual, and online. Visual rhetoric. Not every visual image makes a statement or presents an argument. Some, however, do so in a way that the printed word alone cannot. If an image arouses emotion or brings to mind a controversial issue, it is making some kind of statement to you. What statement, for example, does Figure 3.1 make to you? What details lead to the statement or support the argument? In Figure 3.1, the photo shows a man, a woman, and 2 small children huddled together on the street. There is a baby doll by the girl's feet, and a blanket covers the other people's feet. There is a shopping cart in the background full of objects. The reading strategies below are general guidelines for reading all visuals. Pre-reading. With a visual, pre-reading includes noticing who took or otherwise created the picture or graphic, but often more important are the context and purpose. It may also be relevant where the visual was published, if it was, and when. Print ads especially are targeted for a particular audience. The same ad, in different versions, often appears in different publications. With a political cartoon, the political context is critical to the understanding the humor. Graphics are often meant to convey information or data about a particular issue. Reading for content. To read a visual means to see what is there: pictures and text. Published images are usually carefully planned to convey a message by means of who or what is shown. Reading for rhetorical strategies. As a viewer, consider the composition of the visual. Why did the photographer place things where he or she did? Why are some objects in sharp focus and others not? Why, in an ad, is the text a certain size and placed in a certain location? How does the eye move about the ad? Why is the logo or product placed where it is? In a cartoon, what does the physical appearance suggest about the characters? In a graphic, what data are being highlighted? Evaluation. Consider how effective the visual is in achieving its purpose. How does a photograph make you feel? Does an ad make you want to purchase a product? Does the cartoon make you consider a new perspective? Does a graphic aid your understanding of a complex issue? The following pages discuss additional considerations for specific types of visuals: photographs, print advertisements, political cartoons, and graphics. Photographs. You've probably seen powerful still images in photographic journalism: soldiers in battle, destruction by weather disasters, beautiful natural landscapes, inhumane living conditions, the great mushroom clouds of early atomic explosions. These photographs and thousands of others encapsulate arguments of fact, value, and policy. The tornado devastated the town. The Grand Canyon is our most stupendous national monument. We must not allow human beings to live like this. Sometimes captions are used to help get the photograph's message across. Reading argument. Examining photographs. The photograph by Eric McGregor was taken at a candlelight vigil at Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York on August 5, 2019. McGregor describes the purpose of the vigil: to mourn the lives lost during recent mass shootings in Brownsville, Daytona, El Paso, and Gilroy, denouncing the surge in gun violence throughout the city and country, and calling on lawmakers at the federal level to enact real gun reform. 30 people had died in mass shootings within an 80-day span. The speaker at the podium is New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Although she is an American citizen by birth, Ocasio-Cortez has been a lightning rod for some attacks by conservatives, in part because of her Puerto Rican ancestry and also because of her outspokenness. Not all the shooting victims were minorities, but some were targeted because of their ethnicity. Each pair of shoes represents a life lost in the mass shooting. Lighting candles for the dead, as has been done here, is a well-established tradition in many cultures. The variety of types and styles of shoes reflects the fact that these victims were not just numbers, but unique individuals. The circle of shoes is completed by people standing behind Ocasio-Cortez, and the circle gives the shot its focus. The framing of the shot suggests unity, and unity against gun violence was the theme of the event. The Candlelight Vigil Mass for Shooting Victims, Eric McGregor. In the photo, a woman addresses a gathering of people at the vigil. Pairs of shoes are arranged neatly in two concentric semicircles around the podium. Between each shoe in each pair is a lit candle. A flag is erected on either side behind the podium. The next pair of photographs feature the same person, Greta Thunberg, the teenaged environmental activist from Sweden who has gained international fame for her fight against climate change. Translated, her sign reads, "The School Strike for the Climate." The first photograph was taken at the beginning of a school strike that Thunberg initiated as a means of drawing attention to the future threat that climate change poses for people her age. She has argued that being in school is not as important as fighting for the future of the planet. Therefore, she called upon others to join her in skipping classes each Friday to protest outside the Swedish Parliament building. The picture, dated August 28, 2018, emphasizes her solitude at first. She is huddled into a slight recess in the stark wall of the building, legs drawn up with her arms around them, looking small and alone and unhappy. Friday School Strikes, August 2018, by Michael Campanella. Greta sits huddled against the wall with a signboard beside her that reads, "School Strike for Climate." The second picture shows the change in just 1 year. It was taken in August 2019 at one of the many international events protesting the lack of progress that is being made in the fight to slow climate change. Thunberg is standing erect, holding her sign, and she is backed by dozens, if not hundreds, of people joining her in protest. She is in the front, symbolizing her leadership of the movement. She is not quite centered in the shot. Instead, she is joined by another young woman speaking to her, and someone else has placed her hands on Thunberg's shoulders in an almost protective way. Thunberg is not very tall, but her small stature belies her power. The image makes very clear that Thunberg is no longer alone, literally or in her fight for the future of the planet. Together, with the same figure and the same sign in both shots, the two pictures make an argument that one person can change the world. Fridays for the Future, 6 months later, by Marco Merlin. In the black and white photo shows Greta Thunberg wearing a jacket and hat. She stands in front of a large crowd with a sign that reads, "School Strike for Climate." Practice examining photographs. Analyze the images that follow on pages 47 through 48, keeping in mind the reading strategies listed above. The View from the Other Side by Norma Jean Gargas. A Standoff Over Immigration by Joseph Prezizio. The black and white photo above shows 2 women and a man standing with signs. Few more people and a few cars are parked in the background. The woman protester on the left of the photo wears a sign around her neck that reads, "Making a profit, gagging babies is immoral." The woman on the right, facing the woman on the left, holds a larger poster that reads, "Americans before illegal immigrants." The man on the right holds a long stick on his shoulder. Little boy holds hands of crying classmate, Courtney Coco Moore. The black and white photo shows 2 little boys standing at the first day of school carrying school bags on their shoulders. The boy on the right holds the hand of the other boy who cries. You will have a chance to do the reading, writing, and discussion questions on Canvas later. Argument Essentials. Visual Rhetoric. Use these 4 steps as basic guidelines for analyzing visual rhetoric. 1. Pre-read. Consider who created the visual, what the context was, and whether and where it was published. Read for content. With visual rhetoric, this means reading both the pictures and the written text. Read for rhetorical strategies. Consider the placement and focus of text and visuals. In general, what draws your eye? Evaluate. How does the image make you feel? What mood does it create? Is it effective in achieving its goal? Print advertisements. Alluring photographs from advertisers, car companies, restaurants, sporting goods manufacturers, clothiers, jewelers, and movie studios promise to fulfill our dreams of pleasure. On a very different scale, animal rights groups show photographs of brutally mistreated dogs and cats, and children's rights advocates publish pictures of sick and starving children in desolate refugee camps. But photographs are not the only visual images used by advertisers. Other kinds of illustrations, as well as signs and symbols, which over the years have acquired connotations or suggestive significance, are also used as instruments of persuasion. The flag or the bald eagle, the shamrock, the crown, the cross, the hammer and sickle, the rainbow, and the swastika can all arouse strong feelings for or against the ideas they represent. These symbols may be defined as abbreviated claims of value. They summarize the moral, religious, and political principles by which groups of people live and often die. In commercial advertisements, we recognize symbols that aren't likely to enlist our deepest loyalties, but nevertheless may impact our daily lives. The apple with the bite in it, the golden arches, the Starbucks mermaid, the Nike swoosh, and thousands of others. In fact, a closer look at commercial and political advertising, which is heavily dependent on visual argument and is something we are all familiar with, provides a useful introduction to this complex subject. We know that advertisements, with or without pictures, are short arguments, often lacking fully developed support, whose claims of policy urge us to take an action. Buy this product or service, vote for this candidate or issue. The claim may not be directly expressed, but it will be clearly implicit. In print, on television, or on the internet, the visual representation of objects, carefully chosen to appeal to a particular audience, can be important as, if not more important than, any verbal text. Consider these questions as you analyze print advertisements. Who is the sponsor? What does the sponsor want me to do or believe? Is there sufficient text to answer questions I may have about the claim? Are the visual elements more prominent than the text? If so, why? Does the arrangement of elements in the message tell me what the sponsor considers most important? If so, what is the significance of the choice? Does the visual image lead me to entertain unrealistic expectations? Can using this shampoo make my hair look like that shining cascade on the model? Does the picture of the candidate for governor shown answering questions in a classroom of eager, smiling youngsters mean that he has a viable plan for educational reform? Reading argument. Examining print advertisements. The print advertisement below has been annotated with careful attention paid to the questions listed on page 49. The ad is followed by a brief analysis that shows pre-reading, reading for content, reading for rhetorical strategies, and evaluation. Stop Climate Change Before It Changes You by World Wildlife Fund. The black and white photo shows a man in an open neck collared shirt. His face morphs into a fish face with big, wide fish lips and black, beady eyes. He still has human ears and hair. The photo takes up most of the advertisement. The text at the bottom reads, "Stop climate change before it changes you." Below the text is a World Wildlife Fund logo. The margin annotations on the right of the poster read, "Frightening visuals more prominent than text," intended to show that humans are threatened by climate change. No evidence to support claim that humans will turn into fish if we don't stop climate change is exaggerated. Message is clear, stop climate change, and sponsor is the WWF World Wildlife Fund. The advertisement is for the WWF, or the World Wildlife Fund, a nonprofit environmental organization. The ad appeared in Belgium in 2008. The creepy-looking visual is more prominent than the text. The front and top of the person's head are well lit to show that a human face has turned into a fish face. The message here is that we could all be living underwater if the sea levels rise. The text is brief and direct. Stop climate change before it changes you. The text is located at the bottom of the ad and it reinforces the image's message. Humans are threatened by climate change. The friendly-looking panda and WWF logo are small and are placed at the very bottom of the ad. The ad is certainly attention-getting, and you really need to look at it for a minute to figure out what is going on. However, the human with the fish face is quite unrealistic, and the scare tactic used in the ad seems too heavy-handed. This ad may work for readers who already believe that climate change must be stopped. In that case, the ad is simply reinforcing readers' existing worldview as a way to generate support for the WWF. But the ad would probably be less effective in convincing more conservative readers because it lacks any evidence to support the claim that climate change is threatening the human species. Practice. Examining print advertisements. Practice your analytical skills by applying the 4 steps: pre-reading, reading for content, reading for rhetorical strategies, and evaluation to the following ads. Be sure to keep in mind the questions on page 49. It only takes a moment to make a moment. The Ad Council. The black and white advertisement shows a father reading a book to 2 children. The text on the photo reads, "It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take the time to be a dad today. Fatherhood.gov. Hashtag make a moment." There are logos at the bottom of the advertisement. My Future is What I Make It by L'Oreal. The word doubt in the title is struck and replaced with the word worth. Piper's quote at the bottom of her photo reads, "My future is what I make it." The text at the bottom reads, "You're worth it," and is followed by the logos of L'Oreal Paris and Prince's Trust. Political cartoons. Knowing the context of a political cartoon is essential to both understanding it and appreciating its humor. These cartoons age quickly. You can go back to historical cartoons and appreciate them only if you knew the context in which they were created. If today's political cartoons are not created and published quickly, they will have lost their currency and their humor. Remember that if a cartoon is an argument, it has a claim. Consider what the claim is and how the artist used both drawing and text to articulate that claim. Often the picture will provide the support. Since political cartoons are generally judgmental, there will be values on which the judgment is based. Puzzling out those values may help you understand the cartoon. Reading argument. Examining political cartoons. In the cartoon that follows, the sign tells us that the men constitute the Citizen Test Forum, which suggests that they are there to discuss what citizenship tests should consist of. All of the members of the committee appear to be white men, who actually look pretty much like one another. Their ties are loosened, and the ends are tucked into their shirt fronts as if to keep them out of the way of serious work. Even their clothes are almost identical. So here we have a very uniform group of white men positioned to make a decision about what others should know or do in order to become citizens. The very appearance of the men suggests a lack of diversity, and the text drives home the point if the picture doesn't. The important thing is that we only accept the people who will fit in. The cartoonist, Fran, uses irony to make her point. Those taking the citizenship test don't do so to prove that they will fit in. They are tested rather on the history and the government of the country in which they are applying for citizenship. They will bring diversity and in many instances won't look very much like these committee members. Fran pokes fun at those who want everybody to be like them and questions the right of the group of white men in their comfortable uniformity to make the rules for citizenship. The cartoon has an important and timely message given recent controversy over immigration. Citizenship Test Forum by Fran. The important thing is that we only accept the people who will fit in. Practice examining cartoons. The following 2 cartoons are totally different in context, yet deal with the same broad issue. Explain the point that each is making about the issue, supporting your analysis with details from the cartoons. I Understand the Ten Commandments by Peter Steiner. The cartoon shows a man standing on a higher level than the crowd. He has his hands spread and holds 2 pages. He addresses the large gathering, and the background shows dark clouds and mountains. A man and a woman in the foreground talk to each other, and one of them says to the other, I understand the 10 Commandments, but what is this second amendment he keeps going on about? Sorry, sir, you've been red flagged by Chip Bach. The man at the counter says to the masked customer, Sorry, sir, you've been red flagged. The customer replies, Fine. Where do you keep the chainsaws? The woman employee standing near the door at the back points to her left, where the chainsaws are displayed. Graphics. Graphics are charts, graphs, diagrams, and other visuals that provide an alternative to presenting information as text. They can offer a concise, efficient way of getting information across easily and quickly. A bar graph can show at a glance if sales are higher or lower in the fourth quarter than in the third. A pie chart can make clear how much of the national budget is spent on defense. A map can show emerging centers of population growth. Different types of graphics serve different purposes. It's important to read accurately the type of graphic you are examining. Always look at the title of the graphic, which should be descriptive, and for labels and keys that will help you understand the information being presented. Color will often serve to make contrasts more striking and simply to make the graphic more visually appealing. Of course, you should always take note of who created or sponsored the graphic as you consider what argument it is making. Reading argument. Examining graphics. The following graphic on tobacco has been annotated for you. Tobacco's Shifting Burden by theworld.org. The infographic shows pie charts and maps with a burning cigarette, and the title reads Tobacco's Shifting Burden, From the Rich to the Poor. It provides information about how tobacco's burden has shifted. Below the title, the text reads, More and more people in developing countries are taking up smoking, while people in developed nations are quitting. This means tobacco-related deaths are shifting to low and middle-income countries. There is an annotation on the left side indicating this as a summary. Below this is the heading for the 2 pie charts that are prominently featured in the infographic. The heading reads Global Tobacco-Related Deaths with an annotation that states, It's deaths that are being counted. The smaller pie chart on the left is from the 20th century. It shows that there were 100 million deaths, 70% in high-income countries, shaded in the light gray on the pie chart, and 30% in low to middle-income countries, shaded in dark gray on the pie chart. The second pie chart is in the center and takes up most of the space of the infographic. It is labeled 21st century and shows that there are estimated to be 1 billion deaths. 30% projected in high-income countries, shaded in the lighter gray on the pie chart, and 70% projected in low and middle-income countries, shaded in the dark gray in the pie chart. There are 3 annotations for the pie charts. The first one reads, The shading of the charts shows that the numbers have reversed. The second annotation reads, Smaller circle equals 100 million. The third annotation reads, Larger circle equals projected 1 billion. Below the smaller pie chart is a photo of a lit cigarette with the smoke wafting between the 2 pie charts. At the bottom of the infographic is the credit line. The annotations to the credit line states, Source, 2 individuals from reputable universities, and World Health Organization, a reputable source. Fairly recent, 2009. To the right of the large pie graph is a map of the world that takes up about half of the right side of the screen. Brazil, Asia, and Southeast Asia are shaded a darker gray. The map is titled, Where do most of the world's smokers live? The annotation pointing to the title reads, The other half of the visual, where most of the smokers live. Below the map is the number 50% in larger type. Below the number are the words, More than 50% of all smokers live in just 5 countries: Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and Russia. The annotation reads, Point made through words, numbers, and shaded map. The bottom right of the infographic says, "Find out more at theworld.org/cancer," and is annotated with online source for more information. Practice: examining graphics. Analyze this graphic sponsored by the Union of Concerned Scientists and answer the questions that follow. Where your gas money goes. Union of Concerned Scientists. The infographic is titled "Where Your Gas Money Goes." On the top left of the page, an illustration shows a gas pump with gas flowing out of it in a stream of 5 different shades of gray. It goes down to the bottom of the page. Below the gas pump is the text, $50 fill-up. Text on the right side of the page reads, "Oil companies make huge profits from your pain at the pump. Keep the profits in your pocket by investing in fuel efficiency." In the first gray stream of fuel flowing from the gas pump, the text reads, 1961 Private and Publicly Traded Oil Companies. In the second stream, coming from the gas pump, the text reads, 1363 Government-Owned Oil Companies. In the third stream, coming from the gas pump, the text reads, $7 taxes. In the fourth stream, coming from the gas pump, the text reads, 478 refining. In the fifth stream, coming from the gas pump, the text reads 408 distribution marketing, and in the sixth stream, coming from the gas pump, the text reads 81 cents gas stations. You'll have a chance to answer the reading, writing, and discussion questions on Canvas later. Audio and audiovisual rhetoric. Where in our daily lives do we see examples of argumentation that go beyond print? We see them on television news networks and on talk shows that deal with politics and social issues. We hear news and opinions through videos we see on Facebook and YouTube and listen to them in podcasts, political speeches, and debates. Audio allows all that the human voice adds, from the regional dialect to the tinge of nervousness. Television and video allow all that the visual dimension adds, from body language to hairstyle to movement and pacing. In other words, audio-visual combines sound and motion. And in the case of television commercials, we see most of the features of print ads amplified with the addition of these elements. Pre-reading. Pre-reading a television show or a podcast means noticing the network, station, or organization behind it and acknowledging any known biases that suggests. With some news organizations, it won't take long for a liberal or conservative bias to become obvious. The sponsors of the show may be relevant. For talk shows, a particular part of pre-reading is finding out who the guests will be. That information is often available online in advance. What are the affiliations of the various guests and of the hosts? Pre-reading a show or a podcast, an argumentative speech, or a debate that you are going to hear delivered orally means knowing the affiliation of the speaker or debaters or what biases you might expect from each. It includes familiarizing yourself with the format. Television shows sometimes have regular recurring segments. Televised debates follow a format that is explained at the beginning of the telecast. Podcasts may feature speakers that represent 2 or more political perspectives or may take the form of a single long interview that lasts for the entire episode. Watching or listening for content. Aside from the regional dialect and the tinge of nervousness, the body language or the hairstyle, what is being said? Televised news incorporates photographs, graphics, and video clips along with the script. By way of all of that, what are viewers being told? As you hear different speakers on a podcast or in a speech or a debate, can you start to recognize their positions on the issue? Watching or listening for rhetorical strategies. As you watch a segment of a television show or listen to a podcast, a speech, or a debate, are you aware of any errors in logic? Does the speaker or debater support his or her claims? Are there spoken assumptions with which you do not agree? How is bias revealed? Is the content or delivery slanted for a particular audience? In analyzing commercials for rhetorical strategies, consider how speech, music, and special effects might appeal to the viewer. Evaluation. How effective is a speaker or debater in building a convincing case for the intended audience? How effective is a television segment, speech, or podcast in delivering its content? How effective is it at presenting a legitimate exchange in opinions and not a shouting match? How effective is the commercial in selling a product or service? From television news shows that go well beyond reporting the news to expressing opinions about it, it is only a small step to political commentary shows that from their inception were meant to be sounding board for different opinions on contemporary politics. Some of these shows have been around for decades. Meet the Press is the longest running television series in the history of American broadcasting, and it has been on the air for more than 60 years. The most intelligent and responsible programs usually consist of a panel of experts, politicians, journalists, and scholars, led by a neutral moderator, or one who at least allows guests to express their views. Other examples of these programs are Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, This Week with George Stephanopoulos, co-hosted by Martha Raddatz, Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, and The State of the Union with Jake Tapper. More clearly biased news shows include the conservative Hannity on the Fox News Channel and the liberal The Rachel Maddow Show on MSNBC. Variations of these are some very popular political comedy shows like The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Radio also has its share of news and call-in hosts who are known for their political bias, such as the conservative Rush Limbaugh and the liberal Stephanie Miller. Television and radio were long the standard means of hearing about controversy in our city, state, nation, and world, along with newspapers and news magazines, of course. One of the major ways these older outlets have changed is that they have had to make their content available digitally in order to survive. Television commercials. Television commercials have come of age since their first appearance in 1941 with an ad for Bulova watches. The cost of the ad, $9. Of course, we all know what the big business commercials are today. The cost of a 30-second commercial during the Super Bowl hit $5.6 million in 2020. Television commercials can be analyzed much like print ads. You can preview a commercial or watch it to get the general idea before breaking it down into component parts for analysis. Consider the context, including the intended audience, at what time of day the ad airs, and during what shows or types of shows it airs. Consider text and visuals, as you did with print ads, but also consider the action in the commercial and to what extent sound adds to its overall appeal. To read for rhetorical strategies, consider what audience the commercial targets and how it appeals to that audience, and evaluate how effective the commercial is at achieving its purpose. Reading argument, examining television commercials. In 2012, Toyota changed its slogan to "Let's Go Places," replacing "Moving Forward," which had been its slogan since 2004, and did a series of commercials around the new theme. The new tagline was introduced on December 31st, 2012, in launching the redesigned 2013 Avalon sedan. The stills presented here show the approach the company took in one of them. Look at the images and read the analysis that accompanies each one to understand how Toyota employed audiovisual rhetoric in its commercial. Let's Go Places, Toyota. The black and white photo is a shot looking through the car window going over a bridge. It shows two lanes and the metal sides and tops of the bridge are visible. The photo gives the impression that the car is driven over the bridge during the shot. This is one of numerous shots that show Toyotas moving through different types of landscape: mountains, residential neighborhoods, snowy woods, and so on. These are some of the physical places we can go. The varied landscape suggests that wherever you go, you can do it in a Toyota. Different locales appeal to different viewers, depending on where they live or where they would like to travel. The first series of rapid shots shows the landscape, but not the car. A second shows the landscape as seen from behind the car. The movement of the camera from in front of the car to behind gives the impression of the car outracing the camera in a rush to go places. Voiceover. Not just the ones you can find on the map, but the ones you can find in your heart. The black and white photo shows a small SUV parked at the shore of a lake. There are two small tents on either side of the SUV, the mountains in the background, and clouds in the sky. The ad goes for emotional appeals, including shots of familiar points in lives of everyday people. Some of them are common events, like a trip out for ice cream with the family or a camping trip to the lake, and some are major events, like going to prom, bringing a new baby home, or being in a wedding. Voiceover. Let's go beyond everything we know and embrace everything we don't. And once we have reached our destination, let's keep going. Because inspiration does not favor those that sit still. It dances with daring and rewards the courageous with ideas that excite, challenge, and even inspire. The black and white photo still from a Toyota commercial shows an airborne truck with dust flying behind. There are small mountains and clouds in the background. With these words, the focus shifts to Toyota's tough four-wheel drive vehicles that show how they can function in rough terrain. Toyotas are even shown painted like race cars. One vehicle dances with daring by launching off a ramp into the air. The whole ad campaign stresses moving instead of sitting still. The text tells us that our destination is beyond everything we know and suggests new, tougher challenges, like making the car fly through the air. The music, It's My Life by Tim Myers, builds from soft piano notes at the beginning to a crescendo as the car takes to the air. This portion of the ad goes beyond the comfort of earlier familiar scenes to appeal to the daredevil in most of us. Voiceover. Ideas that take you to a place that you never imagined. Ideas big enough and powerful enough to make the heart skip a beat, and in some cases even two. Toyota. Let's go places. The black and white ad shows a Toyota car with its headlights switched on under the shuttle Endeavour, driving down the highway with people cheering on the side of it. The sky is dark, and the lights on the highway are shining above the space shuttle. By the end of the ad, Toyota is appealing to viewers' pride in America. One place you probably would not have imagined a Toyota going is the parade route along which the retired space shuttle Endeavour was pulled from Los Angeles International Airport to a downtown museum. The words "Born in America" across the front of the Toyota Tundra stress that although Toyota is a Japanese automaker, the Tundra was made in San Antonio. And the places that the shuttle has been advance the idea of humankind's ultimate journeys. The shuttle dwarfs all around it, just as its destinations dwarf most of our dreams of places we would like to go. However, the ad encourages its viewers not to place limits on themselves when they dream. The final shot of the globe reinforces the notion that there is no place, on this planet at least, that one cannot go in a Toyota. Practice examining television commercials. Choose a current or recent television commercial to analyze as the Toyota commercial was analyzed above. Select a few screenshots to support your analysis. Podcasts. The term podcast came from combining the terms iPod and broadcast. A podcast is a series of audio files that a consumer can download to a mobile device or a computer and listen to at his or her leisure. Podcasts can be about anything from fitness to UFOs, based on the interests of those who record them and those who listen to them. Not every podcast is an argument, nor is it about controversial issues. Many are simply meant to be informative or comedic. A podcast succeeds to the extent that it achieves its purposes and can attract an audience of subscribers. Some podcasts are famous enough to be household names. Many are unknowns hoping to become known. Reading argument. Examining podcasts. When it comes to politics and social issues, there are a range of podcasts for any taste. Some feature a podcaster interviewing a single guest. More often, a moderator guides a discussion among several guests or regular contributors. Many podcasts have a clear political bias or slant and are most likely to appeal to listeners who share that perspective and who listen to have their ideas reinforced. You can listen for the content or a speaker's delivery to identify bias, and after hearing a few episodes, you can identify their political leanings. The podcast episode from which the following conversation was taken is called Left, Right, Center, and as its title suggests, it features a panel who discuss a different topic each episode, approaching it from a range of different political perspectives. The portion of the particular episode transcribed here is about immigration rules. The moderator, Josh Barro, who identifies himself as a conservative, introduces the issues of the day, which is an administration ruling that will make it harder for immigrants to get a green card. Barro defines the key term public charge. An immigrant becomes a public charge when he or she is dependent on the government. Barro uses a hypothetical case to suggest that a new rule will favor immigrants who are middle class or higher. He introduces his first guest, Randy Capps, with a question about the subjectivity of predicting which immigrants may or may not become public charges. Capps is not identified as being either left or right-leaning, but he is identified as the director of research at the Migration Policy Institute, so we might assume that he is sympathetic to the plight of immigrants. As a conservative, Barro sets up the conversation in an objective way, but later he tries to emphasize the positives of the proposed change, a move expected of someone supporting the administration proposing it. He describes it as a reinterpretation of an existing law that merely counts for a few more things, like some forms of Medicare, as part of what might make an immigrant dependent on the government. He clearly states that he does not see the new proposal as an abuse of administrative power. Capps reveals his more liberal slant in his concern that the policy leaves a great deal of discretion to the immigration officer. Although most immigrants applying for a green card could not have previously received the types of benefits that have made them dependent on the government, predicting whether they will or not based on what might happen in the future is very speculative and could exclude a large number of people. Even the conservative Barro has to admit that the amount of discretion given an immigration official is worrisome. Tim Carney, a conservative from the Washington Examiner, enters the conversation to criticize liberals who celebrate the desire of immigrants to come to the United States and make it on their own financially, yet don't support the proposal that they must prove before they get their green card that they will be able to do so. The segment concludes with Helene Olin, a liberal from the Washington Post, attacking the administration's entire immigration policy as chaotic because it doesn't balance what type of workers the United States needs to bring in with the needs of those who want to come in. Recession fears, immigration rules, and electability. Left, Right, and Center, date August 16, 2019. Josh Barro. The Trump administration has issued a rule that will, starting in October, make it significantly harder to get a green card. Like before, potential permanent residents will have to show that they are not likely to become a public charge, depending on the government. But the definition of who's a public charge will be greatly broadened. People who are likely to qualify for certain government benefits like food stamps and Medicaid may be considered public charges, even if they or other members of their household have significant labor income. But an immigrant household that makes at least 250% of the federal poverty level, which is about $64,000 for a family of four, will be strongly presumed not to be likely to be a public charge. So this is a rule that is designed to strongly favor immigrants who are already solidly in the middle class or affluent before they become permanent residents of the United States. To discuss what this rule will do and whether it's actually within the Trump administration's legal authority to implement, we are joined now by Randy Capps. Randy is the director of research at the Migration Policy Institute. So the first question I have about this rule is that it seems vague in certain ways. It sets out a lot of things that might make you a public charge or might make you not a public charge, but they're not bright line rules. They're factors that an immigration officer is supposed to weigh in deciding whether or not to issue a green card. So I guess the question is, do we know how big an effect this rule is likely to have? How do we know that when this rule is applied, how many people will be denied green cards who otherwise would have gotten them? Capps. It really depends on the discretion of the immigration officer. The rule, as you said, mentions a list of factors: age, educational attainment, English proficiency, income, employment, and health insurance coverage. The factors an immigration officer can weigh, and some of them are positive and some of them are negative, and some of them are heavily weighted and some of them are not. But there's a lot of factors in the role, and there's no standard as to how many things have to count for or against someone for them to get a green card. Borrow. The law does say, not in very precise terms, that you should not be granted your permanent residency if you are likely to be a public charge. What this is doing simply in part is just expanding the class of benefit programs that count as public charge. So Medicaid used to not really count, and now some Medicaid services do. And this wouldn't go after refugees or asylum seekers. Should we still have this idea that if you're persecuted, you're welcome, even if you're going to be on welfare? And we still have this idea that there are all sorts of programs, including CHIP and programs for young people, that they're not going to be kicked out because they took some welfare or public aid when they were teenagers. So you say it's drastic, but it's taking what is the law and interpreting it differently. I'm very sensitive to presidents abusing power, but this doesn't look like an abuse of power to me. Caps. The reality is that there's almost no immigrants who can get these benefits before they become green card holders. Certainly, if they're applying from outside the United States, they're not going to have access to U.S. benefits. And they're barred legally under the Personal Responsibility Act from getting food stamps and Medicaid, unless they're children, and children are exempted from the rule before they get a green card. So the universe of people who are going to be excluded because they already used benefits is going to be very small. The big exclusion is the forward-looking test, the age, the education, the English language proficiency, income, assets, and all of these things. The issue there is that it's very broad. Now, the law does specify that the federal government can use these factors to make people inadmissible or ineligible for a green card, but it doesn't specify how. What the rule does, I think, is expands the scope so much that a really wide variety of people could be excluded under these terms. Borrow. I'm a conservative. I see two sorts of conflicting poles here. One is that yes, U.S. immigration law should make it so that immigration is helping Americans. Immigration law is not there to serve the rest of the world. It's our law. It's there to serve us. There's something to be said that people shouldn't come here to use our welfare. So those two principles in one direction. But the way you're describing it does bug me to think that there are federal bureaucrats who can look at it and with somebody not having used welfare, do some sort of math and say, I think you're going to go on welfare and I think you're going to go on Medicaid. That is a discretion of federal agents that I find worrisome. Tim Carney, Washington Examiner, write, in a congressional debate, assuming we had a functional Congress that could pass laws, you would have a debate over things like, should we care about income? Because one of the Trump administration defenses of this is no matter how poor you are, no matter where you're coming from, if you work hard enough, you should be able to basically avoid becoming a public charge. If we're looking at what your income is the day you land, then that's not addressing that. The way that a lot of liberals say immigration is great is by pointing to the fact that people who come here want to come and be self-starters. And so if you oppose a public charge rule, then saying that is a lie. You're saying, oh no, we do want anyone to show up here even if we don't think that they're going to be able to contribute to the economy. Helene Olin, The Washington Post, left. I think there's another thing that needs to be taken into account here too, and that is what jobs do we need filled? One of the things Trump has talked about a lot is bringing in more high-skilled people, which is a valid point. But at the same time, what we're seeing right now is that the jobs that are going wanting are actually not particularly high-skilled jobs. Again, could we raise the salaries and get more Americans? Potentially, but probably not as many as we would like to think. So this also begs the bigger question of how are we going to reform our immigration policy so that we get what we need in this country while still trying to help people out as we have traditionally done. And doing things like this, what Donald Trump is proposing, is just sort of, in the end, kind of incoherent, frankly. Practice Examining podcast. Intelligence Squared is an organization that stages debates and discussions to promote a global conversation that enables people to make informed discussions about the ideas that matter. Use the questions at the end to examine the following excerpt from the Intelligence Squared podcast from August 30th, 2019. How the Information Age Crashed Our Democracy. Tom Baldwin and Nina Schick, Intelligence Squared. Baldwin. It's this abusive relationship between media and politics on one hand and that information age on the other that is at the heart of the crisis in our democracy now. Schick. So obviously, people might counter and say, fake news or political propaganda or the misuse of media is as old as politics itself. This is not a new phenomenon. So what in particular do you see in the past decade or the last 30 years or in your experience that has really changed it? Why is this in particular a very dangerous time for our democracies? Baldwin. There's so much more news. There's just this expansion in the first instance. The same expansion, I think, also created a kind of insurgence in the media. Because there's so much more, it meant that, once something had appeared on a 24/7 cable TV channel, it was no longer new for the newspapers to write about, so they had to write something different, something more speculative. The need to generate constant drama and controversy out of actually quite mundane moments of politics, I think, added to the stress and strain on the system. And then you get the political response to this media insurgency, which is to try and spin your way out of it, to try and control the flow of the information, to try and manage it. And it's these two things together, I think, that undermine trust in the media and in politics. It helped unpick the seams of truth, and that opened up space, I think, for people online, below the line, in terms of newspaper comments, in blogs, to begin to question some of the bonds which kept democracy together. You'll have a chance to answer the reading, writing, and discussion questions on Canvas later. Argument Essentials. Audio-visual rhetoric. Use these 4 steps as basic guidelines for analyzing audiovisual rhetoric. Pre-read. Notice a television or radio show's network or station and its sponsors and consider any possible bias. Consider the organization or company behind a commercial and the affiliations of the speaker. Watch or listen for content. Consider what you are being told when you listen to the news. Consider what product, service, candidate, or idea a speaker or a commercial is encouraging you to accept. Watch or listen for rhetorical strategies. Consider if and how any bias is being revealed. With speeches or debates, consider how a speaker is trying to appeal to a specific audience. With commercials, consider the questions used in analyzing visual rhetoric, plus any added by sound, motion, and special effects. Evaluate. Consider how effective the news show is in delivering the news in a fair manner, or how effective a talk show is in allowing varied opinions to be heard. Consider whether a speaker's content and strategies are appropriate for his or her audience. Consider how effective a commercial is in selling its product, service, candidate, or idea. Speeches and debates. Good speeches on controversial issues are some of the best examples of argument. Unlike the brief sound bites that we hear on the evening news or in response to a microphone thrust in a politician's face as she leaves a building, a carefully prepared speech is the closest we come to the 21st century to formal rhetoric. Of course, those in the highest offices have speechwriters, but whoever writes public addresses for candidates or government officials must be skilled at moving an audience to act or at least to change an opinion. Candidates also prepare carefully for debates, but the success of a debate depends largely on the moderator. A weak moderator might allow each candidate to deliver set speeches no matter what the question, or allow a whole event to become a verbal sparring match, which can be entertaining but may not clarify the candidate's positions on a wide range of issues. A strong moderator can hold the candidates to a clear response and rebuttal format that covers a lot of ground in a short time. Listening to a speech or reading one requires focus on the ideas to the exclusion of the distraction of physical appearance. It requires listening for acclaim and support. It requires keeping in mind the audience for whom the speech is or was intended. You will learn more in Chapter 10 about making language serve the needs of argument. For now, consider how well speeches fit in the context in which they were delivered and how convincing you find their arguments to be. Pre-reading argument. Examining speeches. The following speech was delivered by Senator Elizabeth Warren in 2015. It has been annotated to show argument strategies in the speech. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. This place is a fitting tribute to our champion, Ted Kennedy, a man of courage, compassion, and commitment who taught us what public service is all about. Not a day goes by that we don't miss his passion, his enthusiasm, and most of all, his dedication to all our working families. Student Note 1 opens with praise for Kennedy, to whom the Institute is named, reveals her respect for him and for the commitment to the people of Massachusetts that she shares with him. Use of emotional appeal. As the senior senator from Massachusetts, I have the great honor of sitting at Senator Kennedy's desk, right over there. The original, back in Washington, is a little more dented and scratched, but it has something very special in the drawer. Ted Kennedy carved his name in it. When I sit at my desk, sometimes when I'm waiting to speak or to vote, I open the drawer and run my thumb across his name. It reminds me of the high expectations of the people of Massachusetts, and I try, every day, to live up to the legacy he left behind. Senator Kennedy took office just over 50 years ago, in the midst of one of the great moral and political debates in American history, the debate over the Civil Rights Act. In his first speech on the floor of the Senate, just 4 months after his brother's assassination, he stood up to support equal rights for all Americans. He ended that speech with a powerful personal message about what the civil rights struggle meant to the late President Kennedy. His heart and soul are in this bill. If his life and death had a meaning, it was that we should not hate but love one another. We should use our powers not to create conditions of oppression that lead to violence, but conditions of freedom that lead to peace. Student Note 2 shows knowledge of historical background for her subject, the treatment of African Americans in America. Student Note 3, a plea for peace and unity. We should use our powers not to create conditions of oppression that lead to violence, but to conditions of freedom that lead to peace. That's what I'd like to talk about today. A half-century ago, when Senator Kennedy spoke of the Civil Rights Act, entrenched racist power did everything it could to sustain oppression of the African Americans, and violence was its first tool. Lynchings, terrorism, intimidation. The 16th Street Baptist Church. Medgar Evers, Emmett Till. When Alabama Governor George Wallace stood before the nation and declared during his 1963 inaugural address that he would defend segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, he made clear that the state would stand with those who used violence. Student Note 4, examples of historical violence and discrimination against African Americans in America. But violence was not the only tool. African Americans were effectively stripped of citizenship when they were denied the right to vote. The tools varied: literacy tests, poll tax, moral character tests, grandfather clauses, but the results were the same. They were denied basic rights of citizenship and the chance to participate in self-government. Student Note 5. Warren starts using the 3 aspects of Black treatment that will organize her remarks, 3 tools used against African Americans: violence, voting, and economic injustice. The third tool of oppression was to deliberately deny millions of African Americans economic opportunities solely because of the color of their skin. I have often spoken about how America built a great middle class. Coming out of the Great Depression, from the 1930s to the late 1970s, the GDP went up. Wages went up for most Americans. But there's a dark underbelly to that story. While median family income in America was growing for both white and African American families, African American incomes were only a fraction of white incomes. In the mid-1950s, the median income for African American families was just a little more than half the income of white families. And the problem went beyond just income. Look at housing. For most middle-class families in America, buying a home is the number one way to build wealth. It's a retirement plan, pay off the house and live on Social Security, an investment option, mortgage the house to start a business. It's a way to help the kids get through college, a safety net if someone gets really sick, and if all goes well and grandma and grandpa can hang on to the house until they die, it's a way to give the next generation a boost, extra money to move the family up the ladder. For much of the 20th century, it's how it worked for generation after generation of white Americans. Entire legal structures were created to prevent African Americans from building economic security through home ownership, legally enforced segregation, restrictive deeds, redlining, land contracts. Coming out of the Great Depression, America built a middle class, but systematic discrimination kept most African American families from being a part of it. Student Note 6. Contrasts economic opportunities for African Americans and whites. Logos and logical appeal. State-sanctioned discrimination wasn't limited to home ownership. The government enforced discrimination in public accommodations, discrimination in schools, discrimination in credit. It was a long and spiteful list. Economic injustice is not, and has never been, sufficient to ensure racial justice. Owning a home won't stop someone from burning a cross on the front lawn. Admission to a school won't prevent a beating on the sidewalk outside. But when Dr. King led hundreds of thousands of people to march on Washington, he talked about an end to violence, access to voting, and economic opportunity. As Dr. King once wrote, the inseparable twin of racial injustice was economic injustice. Student Note 7. King referred to the end of all three: violence, voting discrimination, and a lack of economic opportunity, use of authority. The tools of oppression were woven together, and the civil rights struggle was fought against that oppression wherever it was found, against violence, against the denial of voting, and against economic injustice. The battles were bitter and sometimes deadly. Fire hoses were turned on peaceful protesters, police officers setting their dogs to attack black students. Bloody Sunday at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But the civil rights movement pushed this country in a new direction. The federal government cracked down on state-sponsored violence. Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson all called out the National Guard, and in doing so declared that everyone had a right to equal protection under the law, guaranteed by the Constitution. Congress protected the rights of all citizens to vote within a Voting Rights Act. And economic opportunities opened up when Congress passed civil rights laws that protected equal access to employment, public accommodations, and housing. Student Note 8. Repetition used effectively for emphasis, the three are reiterated. In the same way that the tools of oppression were woven together, a package of civil rights laws came together to protect black people from violence, to ensure access to the ballot box, and to build economic opportunity. Or, to say it another way, these laws made three powerful declarations: Black Lives Matter, Black Citizens Matter, Black Families Matter. Student Note 9. Emphasis through use of parallel structure and repetition. 50 years later, we have made real progress toward creating the conditions of freedom, but we have not made enough progress. Student Note 10. Warren's claim. 50 years later, violence against African Americans has not disappeared. Consider law enforcement. The vast majority of police officers sign up so that they can protect their communities. They are part of an honorable profession that takes risks every day to keep us safe. We know that. But we also know now, and say, the names of those whose lives have been treated with callous indifference: Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown. We've seen sickening videos of unarmed Black Americans cut down by bullets, choked to death while gasping for air, their lives ended by those who were sworn to protect them. Peaceful, unarmed protesters have been beaten. Journalists have been jailed. And in some cities, white vigilantes with weapons freely walk the streets. And it's not just about law enforcement either. Just look at the terrorism this summer at Emmanuel AME Church. We must be honest, 50 years after John Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out, violence against African Americans has not disappeared. Student note 11. Examples of how 50 years later there is still violence. And what about voting rights? 2 years ago, 5 conservative justices on the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, opening the floodgates ever wider for measures designed to suppress minority voting. Today, the specific tools of oppression have changed. Voter ID laws, racial gerrymandering, and mass disenfranchisement through the criminal justice system that disproportionately incarcerates Black citizens. The tools have changed, but Black voters are still deliberately cut out of the political process. Student note 12. Examples of today's discrimination. Violence, voting, and what about economic injustice? Research shows that the legal changes to the civil rights era created new employment and housing opportunities. In the 1960s and the 1970s, African American men and women began to close the wage gap with white workers, giving millions of Black families hope that they might build real wealth. Student note 13. Examples of today's economic injustice. But then, Republicans' trickle-down economic theory arrived. Just as this country was taking the first steps toward economic justice, the Republicans pushed a theory that meant helping the richest people and the most powerful corporations to get richer and more powerful. I'll just do one statistic on this. From 1980 to 2012, GDP continued to rise. But how much of the income growth went to the 90% of America, everyone outside of the top percent, Black, white, and Latino? None. Zero. Nothing. 100% of the all-new income produced in this country over the past 30 years has gone to the top 10%. Today, 90% of Americans see no real wage growth. For African Americans, who were so far behind earlier in the 20th century, this means that since the 1980s, they have been hit particularly hard. In January of this year, African American unemployment was at 10.3%, more than twice the rate of white unemployment. And, after beginning to make progress during the Civil Rights era to close the wealth gap between Black and white families, in the 1980s, the wealth gap exploded, so that from 1984 to 2009, the wealth gap between Black and white families tripled. Student note 14, effective use of statistics for support. The 2008 housing collapse destroyed trillions in family wealth across the country, but the crash hit African Americans like a punch in the gut. Because middle-class Black families' wealth was disproportionately tied up in home ownership and not other forms of savings, these families were hit harder by the housing collapse. But they also got hit harder because of discriminatory lending practices. Yes, discriminatory lending practices in the 21st century. Recently, several big banks and other mortgage lenders paid hundreds of millions in fines, admitting that they illegally steered Black and Latino borrowers into more expensive mortgages than white borrowers who had a similar credit. Tom Perez, who at the time was the Assistant Attorney General of Civil Rights, called it the racial surtax. And it's still happening. Earlier this month, the National Fair Housing Alliance filed a discrimination complaint against real estate agents in Mississippi after an investigation showed those agents consistently steering white buyers away from interracial neighborhoods and Black buyers away from affluent ones. Another investigation showed similar results across our nation's cities. Housing discrimination alive and well in 2015. Student note 15. Examples, expert opinions, casual relationships as support. Violence, voting, economic justice. We have made important strides forward, but we are not done yet, and now it is our time. Student note 16. She has looked at past and present. Now she will look to the future. I speak today with the full knowledge that I have not personally experienced and can never truly understand the fear, oppression, and pain that confronts African Americans every day. But none of us can ignore what is happening in this country. Not when our Black friends, family, and neighbors literally fear dying in the streets. Student note 17. Warren acknowledges that she cannot fully appreciate what Black Americans have suffered. Listen to the brave, powerful voices of today's new generation of civil rights leaders. Incredible voices. Listen to them say, "If I die in police custody, know that I did not commit suicide." Watch them march through the streets, hands up, don't shoot. Not to incite a riot, but to fight for their lives. To fight for their lives. This is the reality all of us must confront. As uncomfortable and ugly as that reality may be, it comes to us to once again affirm that Black lives matter, that Black citizens matter, that Black families matter. Once again, the task begins with safeguarding our communities from violence. We have made progress, but it is a tragedy when any American cannot trust those who have sworn to protect and serve. This pervasive and persistent distrust isn't based on myths. It is grounded in the reality of unjustified violence. Student Note 18, Solutions to Violence. Policing must become a truly community endeavor, not just a few cities, but everywhere. Police forces should look like and come from the neighborhoods they serve. They should reach out to support and defend the community, working with people in neighborhoods before problems arise. All police forces, not just some, must be trained to de-escalate and to avoid the likelihood of violence. Body cameras can help us know what happens when someone is hurt. We honor the bravery and the sacrifice that our law enforcement officers show every day on the job, and the noble intentions of the vast majority of those who take up the difficult job of keeping us safe. But police are not occupying armies. This is America, not a war zone, and policing practices in all cities, not just some, need to reflect that. Next, voting. It's time to call out the recent flurry of new state law restrictions for what they are, an all-out campaign by Republicans to take away the right to vote from poor and Black and Latino American citizens who probably won't vote for them. The push to restrict voting is nothing more than a naked grab to win elections that they can't win if every citizen votes. Student Note 19, Solutions to Voting Discrimination. 2 years ago, the Supreme Court eviscerated critical parts of the Voting Rights Act. Congress could easily fix this, and Democrats in the Senate have called for restoration of voting rights. Now it is time for Republicans to step up to support a restoration of the Voting Rights Act, or to stand before the American people and explain why they have abandoned America's most cherished liberty, the right to vote. And while we're at it, we need to update the rules around voting. Voting should be simple. Voter registration should be automatic. Get a driver's license, get registered automatically. Nonviolent, law-abiding citizens should not lose the right to vote because of prior conviction. Election day should be a holiday, so no one has to choose between a paycheck and a vote. Early voting and vote by mail would give fast food and retail workers who don't get holidays off a chance to proudly cast their votes. The hidden discrimination that comes with purging voter rolls and short-staffing polling places must stop. The right to vote remains essential to protect all other rights, and no candidate for president or for any other elected office, Republican or Democrat, should be elected if they will not pledge to support full, meaningful voting rights. Student Note 20, Specific Suggestions for Change. Finally, economic justice. Our task will not be complete until we ensure that every family, regardless of race, has a fighting chance to build an economic future for themselves and their families. We need less talk and more action about reducing unemployment, ending wage stagnation, and closing the income gap between white and non-white workers. Student Note 21, Solutions to Economic Injustice. And one more issue dear to my heart. It's time to come down hard on predatory practices that allow financial institutions to systematically strip wealth out of the communities of color. One of the ugly consequences of bank deregulation was that there was no cop on the beat when too many financial institutions figured out that they could make great money by tricking, trapping, and defrauding targeted families. Now we have a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and we need to make sure it stays strong and independent so that it can do its job and make credit markets work for Black families, Latino families, white families, all families. Yes, there's work to do. Back in March, I met an elderly man at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. We were having coffee and donuts in the church basement before the service started. He told me that more than 50 years earlier, in May of 1961, he had spent 11 hours in that same basement along with hundreds of people, while a mob outside threatened to burn down the church because it was a sanctuary for civil rights workers. Dr. King called Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, desperately asking for help. The Attorney General promised to send the army, but the closest military base was several hours away. So the members of the church and the civil rights workers waited in the sweltering basement, crowded together, listening to the mob outside and hoping the U.S. Army would arrive in time. Student Note 22, Extended Example, Personal Anecdote. After the church service, I asked Congressman John Lewis about that night. He had been right there in that church back in 1961 when the mob gathered outside. He had been in the room during the calls to the Attorney General. I asked if he had been afraid that the army wouldn't make it in time. He said that he was never, ever afraid. You come to a point where you lose all sense of fear. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said that his parents didn't want him to get involved in civil rights. They didn't want him to cause trouble, but he had done it anyways. He told me, sometimes it is important to cause necessary trouble. Student Note 23. Closes with memorable quotation. The first civil rights battles were hard fought, but they established that Black lives matter, that Black citizens matter, that Black families matter. Half a century later, we have made real progress, but we have not made enough progress. As Senator Kennedy said in his first floor speech, this is not a political issue. This is a moral issue to be resolved through political means. So it comes to us to continue the fight, to make, as John Lewis said, the necessary trouble until we can truly say that in America, every citizen enjoys the conditions of freedom. Student Note 24 reiterates her claim. Practice. Examining speeches. Use the annotations on the Elizabeth Warren speech as a model. Read and annotate the speech by former President Barack Obama on page 297. We are going to skip this activity for now, but here are strategies for critical listening. Listening is hearing with attention. It is a skill that can be learned and improved. Here are some of the characteristics of critical listening most appropriate to understanding and responding to arguments that are delivered through live speech or recorded on audio or video. Concentrate. If you are distracted, you cannot go back as you do with the written word to clarify a point or recover a connection. As you listen, try to avoid being distracted by facts alone. Look for the overall patterns of speech. Take notes using an outline of the material being covered. Pay attention to the claim and support. Avoid focusing on the speaker's appearance and delivery. Research shows that listeners are likely to give greater attention to the dramatic elements of speeches than to the logical ones, but you can enjoy the sound, the appearance, and the drama of a spoken argument without allowing these elements to overwhelm what is essential to the development of the claim. Avoid premature judgments about what is actually said. Good listeners try not to allow their prejudices to prevent careful evaluation of an argument. This doesn't mean accepting everything or even most of what you hear. This precaution is especially relevant when the speakers and their views are well known and the listener has already formed an opinion about them, favorable or unfavorable. Online environments. Many of us spend a good part of our lives online. What role does argumentation play in our digital lives? Any of us can get into an argument online, but can argument in online environments be studied as a rhetorical act? How does our study of writer, subject, and audience apply when our audience can range from our best friend to someone we may never meet face to face? How do claim, support, and assumption apply to a website or a blog? What is the writer-audience relationship like when we can communicate online behind a mask of anonymity? The prose may be informal. At times, it is the digital world's unique shorthand, but an online argument is still grounded in the elements of argument that shape written discourse. What the online world can also offer us that books, newspapers, and even television and radio can't, except for an occasional call-in show, is interactivity, and hyperlinks literally let us decide what direction our reading of text will take. Pre-reading. In the context of electronic environments, pre-reading can be seen as familiarizing yourself with a new way of interacting. If you have never used Twitter or Instagram, pre-reading is the step where you learn what exactly Twitter or Instagram is and how to use it. You might sample a few posts to see if the feed or channel covers topics of interest to you. You might explore a website to see who sponsors it and what content it has to offer. Reading for content. This step is most relevant to blogs, forums, and websites, all of which you read or watch because you need the information or simply have an interest in the subject, and all of which are more fully developed than most Facebook posts. With social networking sites, the content is about as free of structure as a stream of consciousness novel. Social networking sites are your window into the lives of others. Therefore, much of the content is the content of their lives, plus their views on what is happening in the world around them, which are often presented as commentary on an article, video, meme, or other argumentative article that they share with their friends and followers. Online interaction. Online environments let readers participate in ways that static text cannot. On a social network, you can post a question, conduct a poll, make a joke, or simply tell all your friends what your day has been like. You can comment on a blog or start your own. You can click from link to link to link in an endless chain of connections, controlling the twists and turns of your search. Interactivity is one of the two features that have helped the internet revolutionize communication. The other is hypertextuality, or the ability to read different levels of text by means of hyperlinks. There is no single linear way to read a website. Evaluation. Evaluation of online communication has to take place in the context of its purpose. Much of it is informal and certainly not polished prose. At the other extreme are websites that businesses depend on for their success, which must be professional in their design and content. Networking sites. In educational settings, closed networks are a means of linking students within one class or across several for the purpose of managing learning and providing a place to exchange ideas. Your school may use Blackboard, Canvas, or Moodle as a convenient place to make announcements, explain assignments, or get students communicating with one another. Such systems allow the teacher or students to post to class discussion boards and to respond to one another. On a much larger scale, the term World Wide Web is apt in that it is like a spider web. At any given juncture, there are multiple ways to branch off, and the strands of the web form a structure that is unbelievably complex and intricate. Online social networks are like that too. You may follow someone on Instagram because you had a single friend in common or because of a common interest. They may be people that you might never have even struck up a conversation with in person, but your web branches in many directions for many different reasons. Sometimes that social web brings you together online with people with political and social views very different from your own. They could be some of your best friends. And since people like to share online the latest meme or the latest attack on liberals or the latest dig at the NRA, you may find yourself on opposite sides of a computer screen from people whose views are diametrically opposed to your own. And then the debate begins. More common, however, is probably the bubble that is created by our social networks, which has been well documented. Because we tend to follow and connect with people with similar interests, our feeds weed out or suppress other perspectives, which gives the false impression that our views are more widely shared than they actually are. As a result, online environments have the danger of becoming an endless loop of false validation. Reading argument. Examining networking sites. The social media exchange on page 80 shows how even friends can find themselves at odds over a controversial issue. Read the text and analysis and answer the questions that follow. Peaceful Act of Compassion, William Wharton. Follow along by looking at the visual while I read the description. The screenshot shows the profile photo of William Wharton, a bearded, middle-aged man in glasses wearing a t-shirt and holding a guitar at the top. The text by the photo reads, William Wharton, June 21, 2013. Another peaceful act of compassion from the religion of peace. Below it, another photo shows 6 members of the Taliban militants seated in a group. They are all bearded and wear turbans. Some of them hold guns. The text around the photo reads, Reuters Almay, Taliban behead boy age 10 over spying. 2 children killed after taking food from police. June 21, 2013, www.dailymail.co.uk. Killed as a warning to villagers not to cooperate with Afghan government. The boys named Khan and Hamidullah were killed on Sunday. Their bodies and severed heads were left in their village. Below it, another photo shows a headshot of a man with a beard. The text by the photo reads, Sam Lane, June 21, 2013. Unfortunately, Bill, stories like this just foster hate. Below this photo, the conversation exchanged between Sam Lane and William Wharton is as follows. William Wharton, June 21, 2013. I don't hate Muslims. My son's best friend is a Muslim and I love that child like my own. But her religion teaches things that facilitate such actions as these. Sam Lane, June 21, 2013. Kinda like the Old Testament. William Wharton, June 21, 2013. Sam, you know as well as I that such a comparison is utterly false. Sam Lane, I really don't. Crazy stuff in Old Testament that we are told to do, but we know not to. Most Muslims don't kill people, and even if Muslims were the enemy, Matthew 4:44 and Romans 12:17-21. William's sarcasm reveals his actual opinion. Islam is not a religion of peace. Support, the Muslims who killed these children had no compassion. Assumption, a religion of peace does not kill children with no compassion. William's claim is valid only if the particular Muslims who killed the children were acting in a way representative of the teachings of their religion. To prove that this is the case, William offers the example of his son's best friend, whose religion teaches things that facilitate such actions as these. Whether or not you accept William's judgment of Islam depends largely on whether your own experience plus your knowledge of Islam convinces you that what these individuals did was in keeping with the dictates of their religion. You'll have a chance to answer the reading, writing, and discussion questions later on Canvas. Argument Essentials, Online Environments. Pre-reading. Familiarize yourself with the particular online environment that is new to you. Explore what it has to offer in content and in function. Reading for content. Social networking sites provide primarily a source of information about your friends and their responses to the world around them. Blogs, feeds, threads, and websites may be worth exploring for information you might need or simply have an interest in. Online interaction. Online environments let readers participate in ways that a static text cannot. Interactivity is one of the 2 features that have helped the internet revolutionize communication. The other is hypertextuality, or the ability to read different levels of a text by means of hyperlinks. Evaluation. Evaluation of online communication has taken place in the context of its purpose. Research skill. Evaluating online sources. In your search for reliable online information, you may not always find it easy to determine who is responsible for a source. A good first step is to check the domain name. Next, ask yourself some questions about the domain as well as the author of the material. Be aware that nonprofit sites are not necessarily free of bias. Commercial sites may offer plenty of useful information, and sites with the .edu extension are not always approved by the institution. .com is a commercial site including corporate-sponsored sites such as Nike.com, as well as news sites such as CNN.com, and personal sites. Do you recognize the name as a brand, news source, or other corporate entity? If not, do a search on the site's name to see if you can find any information about it. keeping in mind, of course, that those sites must also be evaluated. If the site is personal, what can you find out about the author? .gov, a government-sponsored site maintained by one of the many government agencies such as whitehouse.gov, supremecourt.gov, and dole.gov, the Department of Labor. Although most government agencies should provide unbiased information, elected officials from the White House to your local town government may be selective or biased in the information they provide. What do you know about the party affiliation or political agenda of the source of your information? .edu, a site sponsored by an educational institution such as Clemson EDU. Although an educational institution may be hosting the website, schools often allow professors and students to put up personal pages that may or may not be scholarly or trustworthy. Who is the author of the information, and what do you know about this person? .org, a site sponsored by a nonprofit group such as Heart.org, the American Heart Association, or SierraClub.org. Nonprofit organizations often have a particular focus to promote consumer protection, civil liberties, health, environment, and the like. In addition, they may be sponsored or supported by groups that have a particular agenda. Check the About Us section. It is possible that the information provided on the site is biased in favor of the sponsor's goals. Interactive websites. One of the most useful features of the internet is the ability to find information about almost any subject in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. We'll discuss more fully in Chapter 13 how to evaluate websites. For now, we will focus on how the interactive feature of websites plays into our attempt to make an argument. Reading argument. Examining interactive websites. In the following example, we have applied our usual categories to a website: pre-reading, reading for content, and evaluation. But we have replaced the category reading for rhetorical strategies with the category online interaction to explore the interactive features of the site. EmbraceRefugees.org by the Ad Council. The screenshot shows a black and white photo of 5 refugee children with the text in the foreground reading, "Refugees are no different from us." A headline reads, "We all want to live without fear." The text reads, "Refugees are people who flee violence and persecution to seek a safer life. People who have no choice but to leave their homes, often on little or no notice, in order to escape torture or death at the hands of extremist groups or corrupt governments. These families are matched with safe countries where they can build a life free of fear and become contributing members of a community." In a larger font underneath this text is "Learn about the refugee experience." Pre-reading. It is clear from the site's web address that it is the organization's site. The name EmbraceRefugees.org suggests that the site exists to aid refugees, eliciting the image of putting welcoming arms around them. We know from the news that refugees in the 21st century have not always been welcomed. The largest groups of refugees in recent years have been from Syria, Iraq, South Sudan, Burma, and in the West, the Caribbean. Syrian refugees are feared in Eastern Europe and the United States because of the threat of terrorism. The copyright for the site is by the Ad Council, which produces public service advertising. A long list of resources suggests that EmbraceRefugees.org has done substantial research into its subject. Reading for content. The home page of the site immediately captures the eye with a picture of 5 children. One looks a bit uneasy, but 4 of them are smiling at the camera. The largest text tells us refugees are no different from us. While our inclination might be to think, yes, they are, the next sentence reminds us that all people are alike and that they don't want to live in fear. Next comes the definition of refugee. Online interaction. The image and words mentioned already are all that appear on the homepage. How you proceed to read the site depends on how you move through it from there. There are 2 ways to maneuver through the site. A downward arrow and the words "Learn about the refugee experience" indicate that you can scroll down for more information. But dots along the right-hand margin also let you click to go to the same information in any order if you prefer. Hovering over each reveals these topics: refugee journey, their stories, investment, watch stories, community, and get involved. The screenshot of the website shows a collage of photos of different individuals surrounding a central text that reads, "Refugees are resilient. Our communities are richer, our culture more diverse, because we are a nation of people from all over the world who are not afraid to work hard to create a better life. Meet a few of the refugees who are bringing their passion and skills to our communities." Their Stories presents a collage of photographs of different individuals and groups from all over the world surrounding text that argues, "Refugees are resilient." Hovering over each image gives you a brief description and a link to go one level deeper into the site to read a longer description. Each has links to let you share via Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. The screenshot above shows pale photos of 4 different individuals in the background. The central foregrounded headline reads, "An investment, not a burden." The text at the bottom reads, "Learn more about the ways in which refugees, ellipsis." Beneath this, 5 links with symbols are in 5 circles: are eager to work, strive for independence, yield dividends, spark new ideas, and invigorate our economy. Investment tries to dispel the myth that refugees are a burden on the countries they enter. Each of the circles at the bottom is a link with information about how refugees give back to the nations they enter. Are eager to work, strive for independence, yield dividends, spark new ideas, and invigorate our economy. For each, as for each story above, the link to the source of the information is provided. The URL at the top of the photo reads embracerefugees.org. The top center shows the title, "What's in Your Bag?" followed by an introductory text as follows: "What if you only had 5 minutes to fill a bag with everything that's most important to you? What would you have to leave behind?" That's the heartbreaking decision refugees are faced with every day. The website shows 3 paused videos. The video at the center shows the text, "We gave 4 Americans a bag and 5 minutes to fill it." 2 videos laterally surround this video. Watch Stories first reminds us that there are nearly 20 million refugees worldwide and that 59% of Americans believe that the U.S. should do more to help refugees or should continue to offer assistance at the current level. Then comes a screen entitled "What's in Your Bag?" with 4 videos that you can move among by clicking on arrows. The first shows 4 Americans who were told that they had 5 minutes to fill a bag with whatever they would take if that was all that they could take from their homes. The other 3 are stories by refugees who found themselves in similar positions when they had to flee their homes, but who have succeeded in spite of those circumstances. In the screenshot above of the website shows a collage of photos of different individuals surrounding a central text that reads, "Together we are one community." Since its inception, our country has defined itself by opening its arms to other people in need from all walks of life. Because we embrace diversity and protect individual safety and freedom, we all benefit from a broad range of cultures and life experiences that strengthen our communities and our nation. Community is another collage of individuals that reveals their success in America, with links to more information. In the image above, the title reads, "You can help make a difference in your community," followed by an introductory text as follows: "You are an invaluable resource. When you help ease a refugee's transition into our country, you not only aid someone in need, you also serve our community. Your generosity can help change a life. How will you embrace refugees?" The website then shows 3 panels from left to right as follows: "Welcome a refugee into your community." You can help a refugee right away from gathering supplies to showing them around their new city. This is followed by a Help Now button. Help refugees start a new life. Teach ESL or help refugees apply for citizenship and settle into a new culture. This is followed by a Find Opportunities button. Connect with refugees, mentor a family, offer employment, assistance, or tend a community garden. This is followed by a Join the Effort button. Get Involved is a call to action and provides links that you can click on to find ways of contributing to the move to embrace refugees. Evaluation. The site is well designed for the ease of movement from one level to another. It makes good use of hypertextuality. The colored photographs are visually appealing, and you become an active reader when you click on the link to find out more information. It moves from trying to establish common ground between you and the refugees to defining the term refugee, to drawing you into stories of refugees through photographs and additional text plus videos. A range of types of appeal are designed to make you sympathize with the refugees. And at the end, there are opportunities to find out how to get involved in improving their plight. This is the end of Chapter 3. Complete the discussions assigned on Canvas.